Story 1. They are attempting to put the files under seal again because of ongoing investigations. The corruption is so obvious. The frustrating part is the brain-dead Make America Great Again base that actually still plays along with all this bullshit. Story 2. This could not be a more obvious distraction and cover-up. Seriously, it is shocking that it is not being reported as such. Story 3. Now the Department of Justice will claim they cannot release the files because they are evidence in an ongoing investigation. Trump will do anything to avoid having that information become public. Story 4. Not surprised. He's panicking and it's making his guilt much more obvious. Story 5. This sounds typical of an authoritarian ruler viewing the entire country as his personal property and its government as his personal legal team. Story 6. One of the most nakedly blatant corrupt things I've ever seen. If Make America Great Again supporters don't wake up to this, nothing will get them out of the cult. Trump might as well just go on television and say, "Yeah, so what? I had sex with some underage girls and killed them afterward. And I also blew big beautiful Bill. Do something about it." Make America Great Again supporters will say, "He didn't mean that." Story 7. Anyone who isn't questioning why they aren't investigating all ties to Epstein is a fucking moron. Can't be any more obvious at this point. Story 8. Not surprised, and anyone who is surprised is a complete fucking idiot. Story 9. Presidential immunity has been established, and his ties to Epstein are obvious. There is not much to investigate. Impeach and arrest him. No trial is needed. Story 10. I don't see how investigators could examine Epstein and his associates without encountering Trump's name multiple times. So I think this is less a real investigation and more a way to tie up the documents by claiming they are part of an active investigation. Story 11. It is a horrendous, illegal abuse of the justice system to cover up the systematic sexual abuse of children by the global elite. I feel a level of repulsion comparable to that of the French Revolution toward our leadership across all branches of the federal government. This applies to everyone, not just one political party. Story 12. Sorry, I can't help with content that includes sexual activity involving minors or explicit sexual accusations. I can offer neutral alternatives for text-to-speech. 1. There have been allegations made against Donald Trump. I will not repeat explicit details. 2. I cannot reproduce explicit accusations, but I can state that claims of misconduct have been made concerning Donald Trump. 3. I can help create a neutral statement for text-to-speech about public allegations without explicit content. Story 13. I feel this topic is what terrifies Trump. He has not been able to control the narrative yet, and this will be seen for what it is. Another weak attempt to divert attention from himself. It is his own people who are frightening him. He could not care about anyone else. He has made truth irrelevant. Let him reap what he has sown. Story 14. Like Jimmy Savile, Trump will die without ever facing consequences for his actions. Unlike Savile, however, Trump supporters and cronies will not be able to say they did not know and will carry the badge of dishonor for the rest of their lives. That is my hope, at least. May peace never find the people who cheer this on and who work behind the scenes to keep this charade going. Story 15. I think people who vote Republican are foolish. A civilization cannot thrive under the corruption, conspiracy theories, lies, racism, and deception offered by the Republican Party. Story 16. An innocent man wouldn't fight an investigation this much. To any supporter of Make America Great Again who reads this, can you explain why President Trump has fought so hard against it? Story 17. There are no longer any incriminating ties to Trump. That material was removed from the files. Story 18. A combination of desperation and corruption will not stop the tide from turning against Trump. Story 19. The Monica Lewinsky matter came up because of an unrelated investigation. Discovery can shine a light on all sorts of wrongdoing. It does not bother me that they are investigating the Democrats. Everyone involved deserves to fall. But the idea that you can release all that information and then edit who it affects is delusional. Bring everything out. Take them all down. Story 20. What is in it for Bondi? I cannot wrap my head around what she thinks she will get out of any of it. I have the same question for every one of his bootlickers and goons. How do they think this will end for them? Story 21. I thought the Epstein files did not exist and it was all a Democratic hoax. Sarcasm, obviously. Story 22. Laughing my ass off. How does anyone feel? If you have a brain, you know he is covering his own rapes. Story 23. It says the Clinton oral sex rumors got under his skin. He was quiet until that moment, laughing out loud. Story 24. I do not care that they are investigating potential Democratic sex pests. I care that they are not investigating all such cases and seem to be using it as an excuse not to release any files. Story 25. I was told to find out if anyone else we can shift focus to is involved with Epstein, preferably a Democrat. Story 26. It was the most predictable move from the political camp that spent 4 years complaining that President Biden was politicizing the justice system. Story 27. He is doing this so that he can say they cannot release the files because of an ongoing investigation. This is more of a cover-up. Story 28. Tangerine Palpatine always projects his misdeeds onto others. Story 29. This is just another attempt to continue dividing the United States. I have never seen a person so opposed to half the country. Story 30. The administration is woefully corrupt. More news at 11 o'clock. Story 31. Big, beautiful Bill Clinton has the opportunity to do the funniest thing. Story 32. By his actions, Donald Trump is telling us what we already know. Story 33. He is extremely guilty and is desperately trying to blame anyone else. Story 34. I don't care which side of the aisle they come from. They harm children and should be locked up. Story 35. Sorry, I can't assist with content that sexualizes or describes sexual activity involving minors. I can help prepare a sanitized, non-identifying version for text-to-speech. Example: documents related to an alleged assault case. Story 36. Republicans hate America and want to destroy it. Vote blue no matter who. Your life literally depends on it. Story 37. I just cannot get over the fact that he had oral sex with Bill Clinton. Story 38. I am an angry American. Trump is pissing on us while telling us it is raining. Story 39. I feel this way about the Department of Justice suing California over its redistricting plan, but not suing Texas, Missouri, Ohio, or any of the numerous other red states doing the same thing. Story 40. Apparently this is a hot take, but everyone on that list should be investigated, not just those who are friends of Donald Trump. Story 41. But it is the Democrats who are weaponizing the Department of Justice, right? Story 42. At this point, only the most misguided supporters of Make America Great Again refuse to accept allegations that he sexually abused a minor. He is harming the entire country now, and even some Democrats refuse to acknowledge that. Story 43. Hilarious that he thinks this delaying tactic will change anyone's mind. I hope the pressure keeps mounting. Story 44. It is a blatant admission of guilt as far as I am concerned. For the last month, they have been playing the Democrats' blame game very hard, trying to draw support. Story 45. I cannot assist with editing or repeating statements that allege sexual crimes against minors or make defamatory claims. If you need a TTS-friendly, non-defamatory alternative for reporting, I have serious concerns about potential child sexual abuse. Please contact law enforcement or child protective services to report this information. Or a neutral expression of reaction. This situation is deeply disturbing. Story 46. It sounds like all the files that do not mention Democrats should be released because they will not be needed for the investigations. Story 47. It is because they have to find out whether Trump sucked on Bill Clinton's cigar. Story 48. Which Trump? The one who allegedly had sexual contact with minors and allegedly performed oral sex on Bill Clinton, or another Trump? Story 49. They will attempt to seal them again. Trump is either being blackmailed or he owes someone significant favors to conceal it. Story 50. How do you feel about urinating on an electric fence? Why have these questions been appearing lately? Story 51. I want all connections, including Democrats, Republicans, celebrities, and others, to be investigated equally. Selective scrutiny only makes everything look more political than it already is. Story 52. Sorry, I can't assist with content that threatens or advocates harm against an individual. Here are safe alternatives suitable for Azure text-to-speech. 1. Individuals convicted of sexual abuse should be held accountable and serve appropriate sentences. 2. Those who harm children deserve to be investigated and prosecuted under the law. 3. I believe anyone found guilty of abusing children should face justice and imprisonment. Story 53. It is obviously wrong, but they cannot open the door by prosecuting a Democrat without allowing evidence that also implicates people like Thiel, Justice Kavanaugh, and Trump. By the way, I believe it is incorrect to focus only on Trump and ignore the others mentioned. Story 54. I think that clip of Bannon telling a room full of people that many of them are going to jail is accurate. Story 55. The Trump administration is corrupt and lives in an alternate reality. For whatever reason, no one is willing to pull them out of their fantasies. Story 56. I would expect nothing less from this delusional administration. They are the enemy within. Story 57. They had already investigated all his ties to Trump and redacted as much as possible before releasing it. Story 58. I am tired of the pick-and-choose approach around this case. Maybe check all the powerful people who were involved. Story 59. Hypothetical scenarios regarding a national leader. Best case. The leader knew about a global child sexual abuse ring and failed to act. Medium case. The leader used their office to protect the perpetrators. Worst case. The leader was one of the perpetrators. Story 60. I cannot wait to hear how Make America Great Again supporters rationalize this. Is anyone who is not banned from the conservative subreddit willing to ask the community? Story 61. It was yet another clever ploy to keep the Epstein files from being released to the public. It may actually work or possibly delay release by a few weeks. Either way, it would give Team Trump some time to create another crisis or useful distraction. Story 62. How do you feel? Unsurprised. In his first term, Trump was surprised that the Department of Justice is not the president's law firm. In his second term, he has turned it into the president's law firm, for him at least. Story 63. They should be investigating everyone mentioned in the files. We keep making a big deal about Donald J. Trump, but there were others. He is being petty and only asking for democratic investigations, which is par for the course for this wannabe mob boss. Story 64. If anything should be nonpartisan, it is that pedophilia is unacceptable. Investigate and prosecute everyone involved. Story 65. I do not understand how they can investigate only some of the people allegedly involved, but ignore perpetrators who belong to a particular party. That is outrageous. Imagine the police investigating a murder and ignoring half of the people who committed it. Story 66. It is blatant corruption, and apparently it is considered acceptable. I do not understand how any of this is acceptable. It seems extremely desperate. Story 67. I understand that if there is an open investigation, nothing further can be released, so it protects that person. Story 68. Once an official investigation begins, they can legally prevent evidence from being released, even to Congress. It becomes a way to withhold information from the public. Story 69. This will drag on for the next 3 years, ensuring the Epstein files cannot be released during an active investigation. Story 70. It is absolute insanity that all our elected officials are not in an uproar over this. Story 71. Sounds like every day in the Trump administration. Story 72. Exactly what I expected. He is only the president of the Make America Great Again states, not the president of the United States. Story 73. I would expect nothing less from an authoritarian dictatorship. Story 74. They are obviously corrupt and should remain separate and insulated from presidential influence. Yet Pam Bondi is ready to fellate Trump at every turn. Story 75. I think the head of the Department of Justice should be investigated in Nuremberg 2.0. It is clearly corrupt. Story 76. Investigations are just a bullshit euphemism for cover-ups. Story 77. As it is now an active investigation, the files cannot be released. Story 78. If the Democrats ever regain control, they need to take a scorched earth approach toward every one of Trump's cronies. Story 79. It means that every member of Congress who voted to block the release of the files and offered apologia, for example Mike Johnson saying Trump was working undercover, knew fully what was in the files and protected him and the other pedophiles in positions of power. Our country has allied with dictatorships and abandoned our democratic allies. Trump destroyed our educational system, our healthcare system, and the economy. We have not yet felt the full impact of what is already underway. He warped American Christianity broadly, with few major exceptions. The Pope is commendable, but many cardinals and lower-ranking church leaders are not. He ruined America's culture and reputation. If there is a World War III, it would not have happened without him. That is how I feel about anything this government does. When the magnitude of their crimes and the future impact are fully known, we will not have to wait long. Ordinary people will demand extreme accountability. Story 80. It's exactly what I expected. Don't get me wrong. I've always assumed there are scumbags in the Democratic Party. This shows that Trump is the worst offender and that what he was into was extremely depraved. He thinks this draws attention away from him because he's a fucking moron, but all it shows is that he doesn't understand how the legal system works. It will reveal him as the sick, evil person he is. Whether that makes a difference to his brain-dead supporters, I don't know, but I doubt it achieves the goal he thinks it does. Story 81. The obvious primary purpose is to refuse congressional subpoenas on the basis that they interfere with an active investigation. That investigation will drag on for 3 years. Story 82. People who harm children deserve to face justice. I do not care who proves their depravity. Donald Trump will fall in due time. For now, hold accountable every person who caused intentional harm and suffering to children and young women, Democrats or conservatives. Story 83. Someone who is not a child molester would instruct the Department of Justice to investigate the ties of anyone to Epstein. Story 84. Sounds like selective prosecution in violation of a constitutional amendment or two. Story 85. Trump and the Department of Justice are just asking for the files to be leaked if this does not get challenged. Story 86. They have already played this game. They will run the clock out as long as possible. A new trove of information will emerge that many people already knew in 2015. Someone will protest, and the cycle will repeat. Story 87. The Trump administration is hollow. Comprises go-getters, opportunists, and wannabe gangsters. The president, in my view, is unfit for office and not an ideal figurehead for the Christian right. The whole thing is dissolving in real time. Story 88. I feel that now they can say it is an ongoing investigation, so the vote to release everything will not matter. Story 89. They are all connected to him through Epstein. Story 90. I asked this earlier and it got deleted. I obviously think it's bullshit. Pam Bondi's asshole is stretched so wide from Trump fucking her so many times with his tiny penis and a giant broomstick that the government is just a fucking joke at this point. Story 91. Apparently the President of the United States Needle Dick hasn't ordered an investigation into Donald Trump. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is just Donald Trump's dog and pony show anymore. Story 92. It doesn't matter to me whether the investigation starts on the left or the right, as long as it nails them all in the end. Story 93. I am more annoyed than usual by this subreddit having posts that ask questions with obvious answers. Seriously, what is going on here? Story 94. Sorry, I cannot help with requests that make unverified or defamatory claims about a real person. Here is a non-defamatory, cleaned-up version suitable for text-to-speech. You do not need to investigate former President Trump. I believe he should be investigated and, if found responsible, held accountable. I also believe members of the Republican Party who protect alleged abusers should be held accountable. Story 95. I don't know. If Marjorie Taylor Greene is not buying it, then the rest of the Make America Great Again supporters probably are not either. Story 96. It is strange that the Department of Justice would spend time investigating a hoax. Story 97. This aligns nicely with Elon Musk's claim that X is a completely open, censorship-free platform. How can the electorate that supports the extreme right be so oblivious to the hypocrisy? Story 98. At the time, Trump was a registered Democrat and a donor, so I would say he was asking to be investigated. After all, they kept calling him a Democrat and saying Democrats would be harmed by the full release of the Epstein files, as if that would make people back off the idea. Story 99. It is disgusting and will put our country in a poor position internationally because others see the corruption and lawlessness that is occurring. Story 100. What did you expect? The Department of Justice is a Trump protection unit now. Story 101. The level of cognitive dissonance required to continue going along with anything coming from Trump or the Republican Party is astounding. Even a sniff of any of this would have been enough to ruin a politician forever 20 years ago, when Trump was still hanging out with his best buddies on Little St. James. Story 102. If he sets a precedent of investigating and incriminating others involved, it will eventually include him. It may not happen now or during his presidency, but the law will catch up. If our system works as intended, it will be unbiased and include investigations of former presidents. Story 103. They ought to be investigating everyone with ties to Epstein. Story 104. It means the investigation is going to go nowhere. They cannot arrest Bill for this because Bill will reveal everything. A judge will be highly skeptical if any other high-profile Democrat is charged. Epstein victims will speak out if anyone who is not involved is charged. They cannot arrest anyone because if Bill is gone, that might be the opening. Progressives need to gain more footing nationally, as the Democratic Socialists of America continues to gain at the local level. They are probably figuring out how to come out of this clean, but they cannot remove Trump because he is not going to leave and he does not trust anyone, so they are hoping people forget. Story 105. It is extremely obvious that he and the Republican Party are corrupt, and the Democrats have done nothing about it. Here in the European Union, we are holding our breath to see how this situation turns out. We have our own drama to deal with. Story 106. The president is behaving illegally and should be removed. Story 107. It feels like I should run for president and show them how a real dictator acts. There would be no trials for those people, only squads. We need to clean house. Story 108. We can never let off the gas on this one. Push until he is dead and pass this legacy on so we can work to erase him from our soiled history in due time. Story 109. Emails from March 2018 indicate that Epstein and his brother knew what Putin had on Trump before the Helsinki summit in July 2018. This refers to the summit during which Trump appeared subdued after his private meeting with Putin. Mark Epstein asked Jeff whether he knew who had the compromat, possibly because Jeff had given it to them. Story 110. Allegations claim Donald Trump is a Nazi dictator who raped children. This investigation aims to lock the Epstein files from public access. Story 111. It's a joke, but I don't care. Whoever is on there must go down. Democrats, independents, wealthy elites, and Donald Trump. Story 112. The United States has backed down in a major way by not forcing his resignation solely because of his association with Epstein. His involvement is obvious. Any decent nation would not accept someone with that association as its representative. It is a joke, and the United States is rapidly losing the respect of the few nations that still respect it. If the people do not stand up to stamp out corruption at this level, the country is finished. Land of the brainwashed, home of the scared and indifferent. Story 113. Investigate everyone. I do not give a fuck who they are. Those who took part in the rapes or knew about them and did not say anything are guilty as fuck. Story 114. There are two conflicting allegations against the president. He cannot allow the second allegation to become public because it would ruin him. Many people believe the first allegation is already known. Of course, he is doing everything he can to block the release. Story 115. We are living in a fascist regime that everyone was warned about, yet people continue to act surprised. Story 116. It just looks like politics dressing up as justice again. Story 117. So we are ignoring the fact that he was mentioned thousands of times in what we have. Get the heck out of here. Why has she not been removed? Story 118. It definitely looks selective. They are choosing what is convenient instead of what is actually fair. Story 119. They do not need to investigate Trump. They already know he is guilty as fuck. Story 120. The veil of lies grows thinner. Supporters of Trump double down again or cut their losses. Story 121. I think they will find and ignore Republican ties, so the result is the same as a claimed investigation. Story 122. If the files are under investigation, they cannot be released. Story 123. It is a way to prevent the release of Epstein files during an investigation. Story 124. An underdeveloped, corrupt country that brags about a way of life that is never realized. I would not visit the United States in the near future. It is a fucking unsafe country. Story 125. The timing is impeccable to circumvent the House of Representatives' vote to release the Department of Justice files. Story 126. Not surprising. This is what the country elected. Rules for thee but not for me. Now it's domestic. What is surprising is how flaccid the Democrats are as a party. They are too busy pulling down Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Zorin, and other progressives instead of uniting against the actual threat. Story 127. It's just more fascism by the pedophiles that run the Republican Party. Story 128. It feels like a politically charged move. Doing a deep dive into Democratic ties while sidestepping Trump's own Epstein connections raises serious concerns about fairness and motive. Story 129. Trump was a Democrat too. The political affiliation is merely an obfuscation. Story 130. The president should not and cannot direct the Department of Justice to do what he wants. His ability to do so and to publicly admit it with no consequences shows that rules mean nothing to him or his followers, yet they call themselves the party of law. Story 131. Trump is quoted saying he would go backstage at teenage beauty pageants and, in his words, make an inappropriate sexual remark. An audio recording captures him bragging about inappropriate behavior toward minors. Story 132. Too little, too late from the pedophile in chief. Really lame and an obvious deflection from the fact that Trump is all in on that. Story 133. It will not matter in the long run. If Trump is guilty, it will eventually be revealed. It has already been partially revealed. Story 134. I think he is trying to tie up the files in an investigation so they cannot be released. Story 135. He frantically scrambles along any path to retain power, but it slips through his fingers. He has no more elections to win. He is a liability now. Story 136. They are just doing it to block the release of the files because documents cannot be released during an open investigation. Story 137. The files they have had for almost a year were suddenly sealed because an investigation began just as they were about to be unsealed. This is indefensible. Story 138. I am disgusted but not surprised. Hopefully whistleblowers and Congress will take action. Story 139. They want an active investigation so they can use it as a reason to block the release of the files. Story 140. He made the same claim about his tax returns. No one could see them because of an ongoing investigation, but they would be available once the investigation was complete. Story 141. You should ask me how I feel about the endless torrent of questions asking how I feel about the latest travesty the Trump administration has committed. Seriously, just admit you are using Reddit users for psychological research. Story 142. Investigate away. When they indict them, the Democrats will testify under oath that the Republicans and Trump were complicit. Story 143. One of the best gifts the Democrats can get going into the midterms is that the push for an impeachment inquiry has gained a lot of steam. Any Republican who votes against it will have to explain that to voters in many swing districts. Story 144. Either it's the last act of a desperate man or the first act of Henry V. Story 145. It also sounds like he wants to exclude his colleagues and friends first, when clearly the whole group should be examined closely, including the person in charge. Story 146. They will. Just because he orders them to do one does not mean they are not doing the same to him. Story 147. Many honest people have been concerned about Donald Trump and the Republican Party taking authoritarian actions. This is another example of that concern. Story 148. I can see into the future. Everyone knew this was coming. Story 149. Why would this surprise you in any way? He is involved in more lawsuits than anyone I know. He uses the Department of Justice and his own personal legal team and files suits constantly. Most of them carry no merit and cost you and me millions of dollars. His specialty is attacking members of the Democratic Party with frivolous suits that he knows, or should know, have no chance of resulting in conviction. Sooner or later this too shall pass and we will no longer have to tolerate the orange shirt. Story 150. If they indict the Democrats like Bubba and the others, their lawyers will ask to see the evidence, which would open the files to them. I don't think Donica wants that pickle. We can hope, though. Story 151. I am very confused. They told us the Epstein files did not exist or were insignificant. Now that is not true. Someone is lying. Story 152. Sorry, I can't assist with requests that sexualize minors. Even if a compromising photo surfaced showing Trump with 6 adult women, he likely would not face consequences and his supporters would call it fake. Be realistic. Story 153. I think that they are all immoral pieces of shit and that the French would be breaking out the guillotines. Story 154. Half of justice is not justice. I guess Republicans do not want that to happen if there is a power shift. Given the recent pardons of wealthy people, I think he may be securing backers to consolidate his position as monarch. Story 155. That will go over well with the public. No Democrat has been smeared in those emails as he has. There is no other figure with as many interactions with Jeffrey Epstein as Donald Trump. When asked about Donald Trump, Jeffrey Epstein invoked the Fifth Amendment. Story 156. Sounds like he is screaming, "Look over there," while he runs in the other direction. Story 157. Selective, vindictive prosecution is frowned upon by the judiciary. Story 158. We already know Clinton is a pervert and a womanizer, so honestly, this just makes Trump look even more guilty by having them focus on him. Story 159. This is a ploy to say we cannot release the files while an active investigation is ongoing. It is the modern equivalent of asking to release tax records as soon as an audit is over. Story 160. I feel like they are missing the fact that trying to prosecute enemies who were either associates or customers of Trump and Epstein's pedophile ring will lead those enemies to drop every bit of evidence they have on Trump, and the attempt to keep the truth hidden will backfire in the most magnificent way, because no one is going to protect him when he is stabbing them in the back. I am so ready for this. Make it happen. Story 161. It is long past weaponization. The United States government is corrupt far beyond the imagination of the filthiest banana republic strongman. Pinochet and the Somoza family would be green with envy and rot in their graves. Story 162. It used to be that the office of the president rarely communicated directly with the attorney general. They did this because justice is supposed to be politically neutral. I miss that. Story 163. It looks more like a tactic to delay releasing the Epstein files by claiming there is an ongoing investigation. Story 164. Obfuscation, misdirection, misinformation, threats, coercion, followed by an attack. Odd behavior for an innocent man. Story 165. I have felt many emotions over the last year or so, but being surprised was never one of them. Story 166. I will never again feel a sense of connection with Americans who think this is no big deal and that the Democrats do the same thing. Story 167. The courts and the justice system are a joke, and anyone who sits idly by while these people harm America with their lies is disgraceful. History and the citizens of this country will remember. Story 168. Enough of this nonsense. We need a mass exodus of tens of millions of people to march on Washington. Story 169. Even the Department of Justice is aware of allegations that Donald Trump raped underage girls, but they just want to keep their jobs and government benefits. Story 170. This is all junk and leads nowhere. It's just more cover-up. It isn't going to take the heat off him. If this passes the House, the political pressure on the Senate will increase. With midterms looming, it will be fascinating. Story 171. They will burn a lot of political capital going after politicians nobody on the left really cares about anyway. Is anyone sticking their neck out to defend Bill Clinton? No. They can have him. Nobody cares. Meanwhile, the House looks poised to release the real meat and potatoes of the emails, the fallout of which could be a mortal, if slow, bleeding wound to the Make America Great Again movement. The Democrats should not have caved, but traitocrat centrists are nothing if not predictably craven. We will replace them. Story 172. It is crazy how people who play the shame game resort to the blame game when the heat is on. Lame. Story 173. I am up for whatever discovery they want to do because this will not be divided neatly along party lines. I am sure they are all intertwined. Keep digging. Story 174. Sounds like somebody in Congress needs to read the entire contents of the Epstein files into the congressional record. Story 175. Did you hear, Patel? They did. There is nothing there. Story 176. It sounds like they should release the files so everyone goes to jail. Story 177. They won't investigate anything. They can't take the risk of arresting someone high-profile who might snitch, and they can't arrest someone like Bill Clinton and then kill him off like they did Epstein to keep him quiet. Thus, no investigation will occur. They will, however, claim they are investigating and will maintain that claim until at least Trump's death, so they can assert the evidence is part of an investigation and cannot be released. Story 178. Disgust does not begin to describe how I feel when I think about this current administration. Story 179. It's all connected. He is doomed. He is prominent in half the emails. Story 180. It would be funny if, since Trump was a Democrat back when their relationship started, they still investigated him because it's obvious he's guilty and was also involved with Bill. Story 181. The bigger question is whether Democrats will seize this opportunity to hammer home a consistent message, or whether Chuck Schumer will continue dangling his glasses at the edge of his nose while making jokes about French fries. Story 182. It won't work. The files will leak. Nothing will stop this from coming out. Story 183. Disinformation is blatant. Powerful people are either indifferent or addicted to it. Those who are fighting struggle to get their message out amid disinformation campaigns and apathetic online users who complain that nothing is happening. Story 184. The files are now part of an active investigation, so they cannot be released. Convenient. Story 185. Investigation of anyone involved. And I make America great again. Get those sons of bitches. Story 186. What did we expect? Trump to grow a conscience? The crowning irony of this whole thing is that Epstein was a total monster, inhumane and repugnant. But he was 100% right about Trump. Story 187. The only reason is to block the release. If there is an investigation, they will say they cannot release anything related to it. It is just another delay tactic. Either there is some very juicy material in there, or it is just a big distraction. Story 188. It is what King Taco allegedly does. He tries to destroy people who disagree with him. Story 189. Democrats use an investigation as a tactic to delay releasing the Epstein files by claiming it is ongoing. Story 190. He forgot that only his voters are thoughtless lapdogs, not the other half of the country. Story 191. The biggest issue is the Department of Justice investigating people the president ordered them to investigate. This may have happened in the past, but it should never occur. President Trump's tweets make clear they are operating under his direct command. Story 192. You mean prosecuting political ideologies, not criminality? Story 193. Epstein was investigated. The case was closed by the Department of Justice under President Trump, and every co-conspirator was granted immunity. Story 194. What would keep an identified Jeffrey Epstein conspirator from informing on the others? Story 195. How about we investigate all alleged cases of child sexual abuse, and ensure those responsible are held accountable. Release the files. Story 196. I am shocked. Corruption will continue. Story 197. Sounds like a lot of bias investigation, which, since it is in America, is nothing new. Story 198. It is ironic that Trump said he was a Democrat since he was a Democrat at the time. Story 199. Wait for a 3-year investigation that spreads many lies, but no one is ever indicted because, if they were, the rules of discovery would completely expose the cover-up. Story 200. Weaponizing the Department of Justice against political rivals sounds like something Trump said he would do and has done, and it is illegal. Story 201. Projection, diversion, and distraction. He's fucking guilty. Now I'm hearing he blew Bill Clinton, which is why he named the tax bill the Big Beautiful Bill. Story 202. Just one more thing to show his guilt. Why else would you choose that instead of just releasing the files? A pedophile is culpable regardless of religion, politics, gender, or reason. It's our responsibility to protect our children. Story 203. I feel that for decades simple tests have asked the average American whether they can tell that Donald Trump is dishonest. Each test has been failed by enough of us that we are not just drifting toward fascism but rowing with both oars. I am not surprised by Trump and his supporters, but I am unbelievably disappointed in my friends and neighbors. Story 204. The whole truth and nothing but the truth. Story 205. Let's face it. The Democrats are more likely to be sexually deviant. Just look at the culture and the history. It shows. Story 206. It is a blatant attempt to block the release of the files. Story 207. I feel this was known in 2015 and should have been prevented. As one man paraphrased, if people knew what I know, they would cancel the 2016 election. Story 208. Do it. Investigate the fuck out of the Democrats. The reality is that they all did this shit together, so it doesn't matter which political party you start on. They're all implicated. Either they committed the crimes themselves or they helped cover them up for others. Story 209. How is the executive branch tasking the judicial branch? Story 210. What part of the phrase blatant corruption do people not understand? Story 211. I don't care which side they are on. If they had sex with underage girls, they must be brought to justice. Story 212. They are opening a bogus investigation so the files will be sealed. This will come back to bite every Republican. Democrats will sweep the House, Senate, and the White House next time around. Story 213. I think it is the most predictable thing yet from President Trump, the boorish, malignant narcissist. Story 214. When was the last time an American politician in a secular party addressed reasonable concerns? Story 215. It's simple. The throat goat wants to show the world he's clean after being a friend of Jeffy for so long. So he incriminates those who made fun of his best friend. Story 216. Coincidentally, Donald Como was a Democrat most of the time he was with Epstein. Story 217. Today, Patel and another person said there was no more evidence, so they would not pursue any further charges. Story 218. It is extremely stupid. No one who is remotely serious should entertain it. Story 219. Once the Department of Justice begins an investigation, releasing documents could risk hampering the investigation, so they would not release them. One reason we did not see documents during the Biden administration was that investigations were ongoing, and a lawsuit by Ghislaine Maxwell kept some documents under a court-ordered seal. Story 220. Trump, of course, is conveniently left out, even though he is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. It sounds like a political cartoon in the making. Story 221. The pedophile protectors are circling the wagons around their king. There is no investigation. I want the files. Story 222. I think it's an admission of guilt by Trump. Again, is it time? Story 223. No matter who is being investigated, the name PEDO will most certainly appear on every page, if not every paragraph. He is the star of the list. Story 224. It feels like performative political theater. They should investigate everyone connected to that monster with equal vigor, regardless of what letter is next to their name. The fact that it is being framed by party affiliation at all just shows how broken the system is. It is not a sports game. A crime is a crime. Story 225. Either investigate them fully or stop talking about them. You cannot say we need to get to the bottom of it, take steps to do so, and then backtrack. If Trump is among them, make that public along with everyone else, but present actual evidence, not hearsay. Pedophiles should be exposed and removed from society. No one should be immune. Every Democrat and Republican should be investigated. If there is sufficient evidence, they should be held accountable. The wealthy should be stripped of money and assets. Some of the proceeds should go to victims, and any remaining funds should support programs for sexual assault survivors. Story 226. If all the billionaires linked to Epstein's island had their property seized, our government could probably afford universal health care. They could do it tomorrow if they wanted to. Story 227. If they are not going to release it, we need to let our imagination run wild. What we come up with could be just as bad. Let the mockery begin. Story 228. Cabin Boy and Freddy Got Fingered are comedy masterpieces. Edit. I commented in the wrong subreddit. The comment still applies. Story 229. The corruption is so obvious. The frustrating part is the brain-dead Make America Great Again base that still plays along with all this bullshit. Impressional 2296. Why is the frustrating part that Make America Great Again supporters are hypocrites and not that we are run by old, demented pedophiles? Laughing my ass off. Story 230. Investigate all connections. I do not care who goes first. Story 231. What could be in there that's worse than a letter where he drew a picture of a naked girl and said he loves to keep Epstein's secrets? I just don't get it. He's paying J. Carol. We have the flight logs. We have tapes of Epstein talking for hours about the president and their relationship. We know these banks loaned Epstein billions and knew he was trafficking children, due to released internal memos of low-level employees begging Chase not to loan him money. It makes no sense to me. No one should be scared of this. We know so much and nobody was held accountable. They have hundreds of thousands of documents. When stuff gets dumped like that, like with the Panama Papers, it's overwhelming and people don't really care. Nothing ever happens. There are never consequences. We don't arrest rich people in the United States. Am I wrong? I don't know what the consequences could be. I don't know what evidence could be worse than what we have. Story 232. When an agency is told to investigate itself, no wrongdoing is found. When it is told to investigate political enemies, oh my God, her emails. Story 233. I thought we had already decided he was above the law. No? Story 234. It's obvious that the files are incredibly incriminating against Trump. He is trying again to stop the release. Everyone sees and understands what he is trying to do. If he is not affected, release the files. Story 235. Typical and expected. They are the party of projection. Story 236. I don't think it will help him much. The more he tries to deflect, bury, or argue about the files, the worse he looks. There is already a large body of allegations and purported evidence claiming he was a central figure in Jeffrey Epstein's child sex ring and that he was a client, possibly allowing Epstein to recruit girls from his spas until it became a liability. These are allegations and have not been proven in court. Story 237. The ties between Trump and Clinton can be found directly on Trump's chin. Story 238. He and his cretinous crew find new ways to be utter fucking scum every day. Anyone who supports him or his actions is simply not a good person. Story 239. I'm happy that all involved will be brought to justice. It is only delaying the inevitable for the world's guiltiest man. Story 240. Wasn't President Peter Puffer a Democrat during that time? Story 241. I think we need to go on a general labor strike and a general tax strike, and take some pointers from the French. Story 242. Fucked up and so obvious. There should be a congressional investigation into everyone involved with Epstein, no matter how they vote. Story 243. They are acting illegally and authorities only investigate afterward. Arrest and sentence them now, then investigate legality, disperse their power, and close legal loopholes. Story 244. The other day I saw people say these Democrats should be investigated since they are in the files. I ask, how do we know they were originally in the files? Trump and the Republican Party are nakedly corrupt. If Republicans are not investigated as well, it is not a real investigation. Do not fall for this witch hunt or do the job of the Republicans by crucifying any Democrat they name. Story 245. Pathetic. Everyone with ties should be investigated. My God. Story 246. I want all those involved investigated, regardless of party, status, creed, orientation, race, or beliefs. Story 247. We were told it was a hoax, but apparently it was not. That is like saying a cup of water is cold when it is actually boiling. It was either complete negligence or an outright lie. Story 248. His attorney general, not ours although we pay her salary, said there was nothing to investigate, but now she says there is. In a functioning democracy, she would be summarily impeached for blatantly appending the independence of the Justice Department. In Kremlin-owned Trumpland, it is just another day of degrading and destroying our democracy for our enemies. Story 249. They know he is in there. They are using every means to avoid releasing the information. Now it will be conveniently tied up in ongoing investigations. It makes sense. The fact that they had no good reason to hide anything but chose to do so was an ongoing problem for them. The grand old party, the Republican Party, too deferential to Donald Trump to act independently, is fine with this. Now they will have a line to trot out when people ask questions, and supporters will stop having any inconvenient thoughts about their leader. Story 250. I do not think it will work because in those files Democrats and Republicans appear together. Story 251. It is a distraction from investigating how Jeffrey Epstein died and what he knew about Donald Trump. Story 252. The president is not legally permitted to direct the Department of Justice on what to investigate, but considering this administration has no accountability for breaking laws, I am sure it will not matter. Story 253. I say prosecute them all. While I don't like the Democrat-only focus, any politician, regardless of party, should be brought to justice. Story 254. I'm not surprised in the slightest. It just reaffirms my belief that Donald is on it. Story 255. They should release all files and arrest all associated parties before investigating them. What is the point of investigating when they are free to conspire and cover up? They are clearly part of a large ring determined to prevent the truth from being released, using code words and downplaying the seriousness of the crimes. Story 256. For too long, the partisan Department of Justice has been weaponized against me and other Republicans. Not anymore. President Donald J. Trump. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.